Background and foreground. When you're on the road, particularly getting to different gigs and events, there's a lot of time by yourself to sort of think, to gestate, unless you've got a podcast rolling, and even then, my mind tends to wander. I don't know about anybody else's. So the one of the things I was thinking about on the way up here was the concept of background and foreground. I came to that conclusion. It wasn't the first thing I thought of, but I don't know that this could become a long video if I take you through the entire thought process. I've been wrestling with some things in the Aether Sphere series. I've got some new elements that have popped into my mind that seem very relevant and exciting, and I've been trying to think of how to thread it into the framework of the overall story. Does it fit? Or if it doesn't fit, do old things need to go to accommodate the new storylines, or does the new storyline just need to be dropped to hold to the storyline that I already had going on? If all that made sense, great. If it didn't, hit me up. So the concept that I started thinking about more was background and foreground. So you can see this really clearly in art, in physical art, paintings, photography, film, where there is a forward focus and then there's background stuff. And I think as a creator of stories, one of the things a decision that you need to make to keep your story from getting cluttered is to decide what's in the foreground and what's in the background, because you can't cover everything at one time. It's going to get very sloppy. It's going to get very messy, very confusing, probably for you and for the reader. So again, in my last video about the rule of three, about figuring out where you are and where you need to get back to, having an idea of the foreground and the background helps you kind of differentiate these things. And what I mean when I say that is that you want to have a central focus at one point in time. Now, there can be other subplots going on in the background. So for instance, right now, the focus of the story is to get the gem. All right. What's the thematic reason behind the gem? Does the gem represent one of the main characters taking control over their lives again? Does it represent redemption? Does it represent fulfilling a promise to somebody? And that's going to be the decision by you, the author. But that's the foreground. That is, and if you make your plots thematic, well, one, it's going to resonate stronger with the audience, but two, it's also going to help you decide what the important things are to keep and what things to kind of either cut or push to the background. Now, the background stuff can be the romantic tension between two characters, or the tension between two other characters that are enemies or are scorned lovers, or are in two people that traditionally don't like each other that are in a tenuous alliance, and all that's in the background, but that's not the focus of the scene at that point in time. Now, you can shift focus in different scenes to give a little more breathing room to the subplots, as you're going through, but the overall focus of that story needs to be in the foreground. And then you can have lots of other things happening in the background as you want to and as you can juggle it. And as a fantasy writer, it's tough because there are certain things you can't jam everything into every single chapter as much as we'd love to. It gets very convoluted. It gets very messy. It gets very confusing. So separating that and being like, okay, here's what's in focus right now. Twist that lens, focus in on this thing right now, and ride through that thematic wave, ride through that story in the way that it relates to the theme as a whole, going back to the core premise or the central question that I've been talking about in other lectures. So having that focus, knowing the thing that you're focusing in on, all right, and this is the piece of the story that resonates with the character, resonates with the overall plot, resonates with the theme. That is the focus. Other things in the background that are happening or that are being referenced should reinforce that theme. And that's another thing that helps you make the background strengthen the foreground. Because if you think about it, like, one of your favorite paintings or photographs, the background is helping tell the story of whatever's going on in the foreground. Whether it intended to or not. So if there's, like, let's say it's a photo of a marriage proposal and there's a war going on in the background, that's sending a very different message than a proposal with family members all clapping around, which sends a different message of a marriage proposal in a dingy apartment with nobody else around. All right. The background is reinforcing the story. It's reinforcing the theme and the premise that you are trying to explore. So just keep that in mind. If you were at a point in your story where you're racking your brain and you're trying to figure out, like, okay, I've got all these different moving pieces. How do I make it all make sense? Focus in. Decide what that central question is, what that core premise is. What is the theme you were exploring at that time? How is the character working through something that promotes that theme or is connected to that theme? Also, how are you exploring that theme? Okay, and that's your focus. And then you can let the other things kind of happen in the background. But again, the background stuff, the other relationships, the whatever conflicts are going on behind the character, or whatever even texture, if they're traveling through some place that is very scary or unknown or anxiety, driving, have that reinforce the theme. It will give you a lot more clarity as a creator, and it will give more clarity to the audience so they will be more able to engage with the story. That's most of my thought process on that. I can't do a Q&A here, but if any of you have any questions or comments, feel free to hit me up in the comments. Like and subscribe, and I will see you next time.